This recording is going to go very quickly over some of the structures associated with the brain. In this recording, I am not going to discuss functions. I'm just going to point out on the models some of the structures. So first, we're looking at a lateral view of the brain. Here you see the left cerebellar hemisphere, and here you have the left cerebral hemisphere. Down here is the brainstem. You can see right there a little bit, there's the pituitary gland. Now over on the side, right here, this is the lateral sulcus. It separates the temporal lobe, right here, so here's temporal lobe, from the parietal and the frontal lobe. So frontal lobe is right here, and parietal lobe, let's do gray, is going to be right in here. This back area is the occipital lobe. You can't see the insula with this. You have to actually pull that temporal lobe away so you can see the insula. Also in this view, I'm going to show you it a different way so you can see it even better. It's going to erase this. Is here is the central sulcus right here. So right anterior to this here is the precentral gyrus. Here is the postcentral gyrus. Precentral gyrus is the location of the primary motor cortex. The postcentral gyrus here is the location of the primary somatosensory cortex. Remember also in the frontal lobe you have premotor cortex and prefrontal cortex. In the temporal lobe here you have the auditory cortex and the olfactory cortex. Occipital lobe back here, the visual cortex, and well, the insula is going to have the gustatory cortex, but we haven't showed you that yet. So here you're looking at a superior view of the brain, and in blue I'm just going to draw a line that shows you this is the central sulcus, this shallow groove. In green, this is the precentral gyrus. In the red is the postcentral gyrus. So everything anterior of that blue line is the frontal lobe. Okay, so then you see parietal lobe back here, occipital is back here. You can't see the temporal because we're looking at it from above. Let's see. Here is an inferior view of the brain. So now you see right cerebellar hemisphere, left cerebellar hemisphere. Over here is the right cerebral hemisphere. Over here is the left cerebral hemisphere. We also, I'm going to erase this so you can see a little bit better, is in the red is the pituitary gland. Now having the pituitary there is going to block our view of the mammillary bodies. In labs, some of the pituitary glands have been removed and you'll be able to actually see the mammillary bodies if the pituitary has been removed. You also have, I'm going to do yellow first, is I'm going to highlight the olfactory bulbs, the right and left. Then in blue, I'm going to highlight the right and left olfactory tracts. In gray, I'm going to do the optic nerves. This is the right optic nerve right here. Here's the left optic nerve. In green, right here, is the optic chiasm. And black, I'm going to do the optic tracts. Right here is the right optic tract. Over here is the left optic tract. Olfactory bulbs, olfactory tracts involved in smell. The optic tract, the optic nerves, and the optic chiasm are involved in vision. You also see parts of the brainstem here. Now with this one, what we have done is you're still looking at an anterior view of the brain, so you can see the pituitary. So if you see the pituitary, you know you're always looking at an anterior view of the brain. But I have removed most of the cerebral cortex and the cerebellum. But on either side, you see here, there is the insula. So if I kind of taken this over here, pulled it back, you would have seen that there. So those are the insula. That's the insula. That's one of the other lobes of the brain that's involved. One of the things that's involved is in interpretation of taste. So here again, what you're seeing is the little bits of the optic nerves. Here's the optic chiasm right there. Again, here's the brainstem. This is the pons right here. In blue is the medulla oblongata that you can see. Midbrain's up in this region here, and it's not really, can't see it very well with this, so I'm not going to tag that. Now here's a sagittal section of the brain. So we're looking in, I'm going to trace the left cerebral hemisphere that you see. The green is the corpus callosum. We also have, it's actually you see number 23, that's the pineal gland or pineal body. It's part of the epithalamus. Here's a choroid plexus of your third ventricle. Those two together also help form the epithalamus, which is part of the diencephalon of the brain. Now the brown that you see, this little brown thing, is called the intermediate mass of the thalamus. This right in here, it's kind of raised up, is the thalamus. So you have a thalamus on the left and the right. This little intermediate mass helps connect the two. Over here is the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus helps form the floor of the third ventricle. So kind of these, what would be in this region with the diencephalon would be the third ventricle, but I'm not going to ever tag that and say, well, I want the third ventricle. I'm going to erase this again. So we have right in the blue, that's a mammillary body. The pituitary is going to be red, pituitary gland, and the white stalk is the infundibulum. Now in this view, I want you to bring your attention to this gray right here. That is the optic chiasm. So I recommend looking at the brain, the inferior view, pulling apart, and then looking from the side. That right there is the optic chiasm. You also see, I'm going to trace it with gold, cerebral aqueduct, which transports cerebrospinal fluid from the third ventricle down to the fourth ventricle. This right here is the fourth ventricle. This down here is the central canal. It's going to be right continuous with the spinal cord. This is the pons, medulla oblongata here. This other part here is the midbrain. I got to look very carefully. Doesn't look like much on this view. I'm going to erase so you can see. You see this little bump here and a little bump here. The top one is a superior colliculus. The bottom one is an inferior colliculus. Now you've got two superior colliculi and two inferior colliculi. You're only seeing half the brain, so you're seeing those two there. Over here, here's the cerebellum, and the white that you're seeing, all this white here, is called the arbor vitae. Also, failed to mention, is the number 12 is called the fornix. This is the fornix. This membrane right here is called the septum pellucidum. It separates the two lateral ventricles. Here is the where we pretty much have the diencephalon and the brainstem. We have the insula, but we removed the cerebellum and the rest of the cerebrum, and you're looking at a posterior view of the brain. This little diamond is the fourth ventricle. So what would have been attached here with those metal things would have been the cerebellar hemispheres. So this is the fourth ventricle right here. The green are going to be the superior colliculi. The red are the inferior colliculi. Collectively, they're the corpora cavernosa. Now right in here, if I was really careful, that area right in there would have been the third ventricle, but I'm not going to tag it. And again, it's hard, but the thalamus would be in this general area here, but it's pretty hard to tag. Let's see. So we did this one. Here's anterior view, so I did that one, so I already went through that. Let's see, anything else that we got. Now here is, you've taken this model and you broke it in half and you're looking at a sagittal view. So again, here's the pituitary gland, infundibulum, optic chiasm, mammillary body, hypothalamus. You see thalamus right in here. Now 22 is the intermediate mass of the thalamus. Pineal gland, 23. Here's a choroid plexus of your third ventricle. Cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle here. Superior colliculi, colliculus, inferior colliculus. You've got pons, medulla oblongata, and again, collectively, this all part here is part of the midbrain. Let's see. Now here is the model of the ventricular system of the brain, which is involved in its circulation of cerebral spinal fluid. The lateral view you see here, this is a lateral ventricle. This whole thing is a lateral ventricle. A is tagging a interventricular foramen. So that is going to allow cerebral spinal fluid from the lateral ventricle to go into this structure here, which is the third ventricle. Then we have from the third ventricle down the structure I'm going to do in blue. That is this, which is tagged as B here, is the cerebral aqueduct. Down here is the fourth ventricle. Now looking at an anterior view, you can at least in the two lateral ventricles, you can see the pink. The pink is a choroid plexus. Each of them is a choroid plexus that produces cerebral spinal fluid. If you look in each of the ventricles, you will see some pink, and each of them represents a choroid plexus. Now here is a model that helps to depict the dura mater. So A is the dura mater, which has been, most of it's been cut, and you see a little bit. The blue, and especially the little blue things here, those are arachnoid granulations. So remember, they absorb cerebral spinal fluid and then going to deliver that absorbed cerebral spinal fluid back into the venous system. If we pull this away, we're actually going to see one of the structures that is formed from the dura mater. And you see here, this is the falx cerebri. And if you look at the blue that's in here, the blue are the dural sinuses. So they are veins that are going to be draining deoxygenated blood from the brain, and also that's where the cerebral spinal fluid is going to go into. So the falx cerebri helps to separate the two cerebral hemispheres, kind of like, I always say, like shrink wrapped it, kind of limits the movements of the two cerebral hemispheres. So that's it. That's just a real quick view of some of the structures that we have in lab.